that I look forward to each Monday, and it's called the Roundup Wrap, and we chat to our resident analyst, Mighty Jamie, and he talks to us about some of the stories that we highlighted in the news, but what played out in the week that was, and if we have time, we often look at the week ahead as well. And we start with South Africa's first national convention, which concluded in Pretoria on Saturday, setting the stage for what will be a national dialogue. Let's find out from Mighty Jamie what he thought of it. So, Mighty Jamie, a very good morning to you. Welcome to the program. I hope you had a good week.
Morning to you, Peter. Morning to the viewers, the listeners. Yes, I did have a good weekend. I hope you had one too. So you want me to jump straight into the South African topic?
Absolutely.
So, thinking about the moment of the national dialogue, this is something that was foreshadowed by South African President Cyril Ramaphosa in 2024 and seems to have been part of the agreement with the Democratic Alliance as they were signing the statement of intent that there needs to be this national dialogue. It's an idea which has been circulating in South Africa for a period of time because there's this idea that a social compact or a renegotiation of the the different obligations, rights, responsibilities, social tensions will actually rejuvenate and redirect the South African economy. The only challenge that exists is that there have been so many similar social compact discussions, and there is a frustration and an agitation and almost even a rejection of another process wherein there are talks. So when President Cyril Ramaphosa came into power, he announced gender summits. He announced summits on jobs. And this followed from various other lehotlas and talk shops that have been hosted by the African National Congress over the years. So from the public side, there is a little bit of fatigue, a little bit of not anxiety, but almost dissatisfaction with the whole process. Now, evaluating this particular national convention and how it unfolded, unfortunately, for the presidency of South Africa, as well as those who are supporting this initiative, there's been some drama, controversy, and also loss of credibility as a result of the withdrawal of various foundations of prominent South Africans who have provided leadership, the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, the Sisulu Foundation, the Biko Foundation. All of these withdrawals undercut the credibility of the launch in and of itself. And on the day of the launch, we saw, of course, that there were some skirmishes that broke out on the stage, Peter. So all of those things taken together, plus the controversy around the costing of this particular initiative, has been such that while the president hopes that by next year, when they get this rolling, it will be something that can facilitate, restructuring of South African societal relationships at the very least, it's unlikely to achieve that outcome because of all of the dramas surrounding it and also where the political moment is right now. Something that Cyril Ramaphosa has always thought of himself as being great at: negotiations, dialogue, facilitation, through CODESA, the negotiation of the constitution in and of itself, maybe even when he was NUM chairperson. But this particular time, it looks as if this may not be the answer. And while he's attempting to do it for his legacy, it may not have the results that he's hoping for, Peter.
Does a national dialogue at this time um, come almost as an admission by the ANC, because it's been governing the country since democracy came into being? Is it them inadvertently saying we failed?
In a way, it is. It is an admission of defeat, and it is an admission almost that they don't have anything in the short to medium term to provide for the population, because we saw the latest unemployment data indicated that unemployment had ticked up a little bit. We also saw from the GDP data that actually the growth is actually stagnant at this particular moment. So if President Cyril Ramaphosa had done this in 2018, Peter, if he had had these conversations at the beginning of his tenure, it would have made sense for them to happen then, and he would have had credibility and authority, and even some kind of mechanism to lead to people to believe that something is going to happen. Having them this late, going towards a major election in 2026, which is the local government elections, and the next election where the ANC may very well lose all power, considering that they've been at this for 31 years, I think it is an admission that, look, we don't know what we're doing in terms of how to solve the problems the communities are facing. But that is us looking at it at its best. The reality is, it is an admission of guilt, an admission of failure as a result of all of the corruption, the mismanagement that has been happening over the decades, which has led to, losses of money and all of this money trickling into the wrong places. These are the outcomes, Peter.
Okay, let's go to the DRC now, where the DRC has rejected Kenya's appointment of a consul general in the eastern city of Goma, describing it as inappropriate. Why would Nairobi want a presence in such a contested city? And why is Kinshasa, do you think, pushing back so hard on this issue?
Well, let's start with Kinshasa. I think it's very clear to me why the Democratic Republic of Congo would say that they're displeased with this particular move, because the move attempts to create credibility, it attempts to provide legitimacy, and almost to support a secession type of move by the people who are living in that part of the DRC. And as a result of that, if I'm the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo, I'm not going to encourage or facilitate or clap hands for any move which attempts to create normalization, regularization, legitimization of places like Goma as standalone governments and entities. So in and of itself, I think the DRC is justified for their response, Peter. When it comes now to the Kenyan motive, it's unclear to me why Ruto would be pursuing this particular direction, unless maybe he has been asked to do that by the Americans as a test case to see whether or not this will hold, because we already know that the Rwandan government is willing to recognize, the eastern parts of the DRC as standalone. But the question then becomes, what of the rest of the world? This could be a test case, or it could simply be that Kenya requires the mineral resources in that part of the DRC, and they are only able to do that if they put somebody on the ground who can negotiate, who can begin to create the diplomatic relationships that they may need to actually have relationships, economic relationships with the Eastern DRC. But also it may be just a pragmatic recognition that DRC is going the direction of how Libya basically is operating as two separate countries right now, and people are negotiating with two centers of power, buying oil from the legitimate government, but also from the illegitimate government, and that could be the reasoning. But this in and of itself indicates that the conflict that everyone has said is over is clearly not over, and things are still happening after the signings, all of the signings that we've seen, which were ceremonial and very high profile. On the ground, the material conditions are not shifting, Peter.
Still with the DRC, Qatar says that it's drafted a peace agreement between the DRC government and M23 rebels. But the 18 August deadline, which is today, still no deal in play. I wonder if this delay or this slowness to get something to happen tells us a lot about the complexity of the negotiations, or that it's just another sad chapter in that there's lots of talk, but hardly ever anything gets done.
Deal or no deal. This is what we would call this show if it was a show, Peter, because we keep finding out that whatever we thought was done is not done. And I think we had a conversation earlier in the year when all of these things were being announced as being done, and finally we have a deal. We asked the question, this has been so ongoing. There's been this peace process, that peace process. Now, even we saw a few weeks ago, the African nations saying they are merging the peace process even after a deal was signed. I think this just shows that the Americans and the Qataris are now beginning to recognize that this thing is not as simple as they thought it was. It wasn't just a matter of bringing in two prominent people, get them to take photos, and then you think that the deal is done or that peace has been achieved in that region. So it does speak to the complexities. And if you recall, some of the issues which were being raised by Paul Kagame around the plight of Tutsis, the history there. If you think about the questions around integration into the army, the questions around recognitions of certain people's rights, all of these things make this a complicated conversation. And then you add the mineral resources and the geopolitical tensions between America and China already has large mining operations across DRC. Then you add the African leader factor. This was never a simple conflict, and now I think we are getting to understand more and more that the conflict is still going on, and in as much as the reporting on it has subsided, or the coverage of some of the elements have subsided, it seems as if everything on the ground is still moving towards a direction where the M23 are trying to consolidate control of, the Eastern DRC, where the tensions between Rwanda and DRC have not yet abated. And I think we are beginning to see now more and more that, yes, it is complex. Yes, it is very disappointing that the DRC continues to be on one side, one of the richest, if not the richest, mineral resource country in Africa, but on the other side, the poorest, because of these continued conflicts, these continued disputes. And also we can see clearly this issue is bigger than even what the Americans and the Qataris thought they could do. Although we already knew that, look, they don't have some of the ground vision and experience and expertise to be able to pull off what they thought they could pull off. It was always ambitious to think that it could be done from outside Africa. Now the question then becomes: will the second process be more effective? We'll have to see, Peter.
Okay, SADC met over the weekend in Madagascar. I think it's the first time the summit has taken place there. They take over the chairship. Another one of those gatherings, and so much going on in SADC. Should we still be paying attention to these meetings? Do the SADC citizens feel like SADC as a grouping is actually doing anything for them? Did anything come out of this meeting in your view?
Peter, I'm so despondent, and I'm one of the people who actually would answer the question and say we shouldn't care as much as we do. Obviously, we have an obligation to report and talk about how there's a change in leadership and all of these things. But really, for ordinary Africans living in the SADC region, these meetings have no bearing on their lived realities. There's been so many elections, protests, issues playing out economically and socially within the SADC region. I mean, right now you are seeing tensions between some activist movements in South Africa, tensions between them and the Zambians and other groupings, but nothing is coming of it. So having considered that, you see the lack of involvement by SADC and the lack of action, even when there are electoral disputes, it really renders it as a body that doesn't really seem to help ordinary civilians. But if you are an institutional player, if you are a bank, if you are an electricity or mining company, the regional integration and some of the policies that they've pushed for have been quite helpful. But I don't really expect much going forward. I don't think anybody else should really. It's one of those entities, Peter, that I think has lost relevance to ordinary people.
And in 30 seconds, I know that you studied law. Has the Lungu family appeal got a chance?
I don't think so, to be quite honest. And I don't think that the Constitutional Court would want to normalize this type of a request. So I doubt that they'll have prospects of success, but we'll have to wait and see what is argued.
Mighty Jamie, always good talking to you. Thanks so much indeed. Have an awesome week ahead, and we'll chat next Monday.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you to all the listeners, wishing them as well a good week ahead.
That's one of our